Everybody learns something a little different in college. Some people learn how to code. Some people learn about business or about art. Some people learn how to operate hungover. And some people, very few people, learn how to pitch. And that is what we will be discussing today.
Yes, these are our 10 top college pitchers for the 2022 Major League Baseball draft. Jake, that was you. You were a college pitcher, right? As we established earlier, you are no longer eligible, so we are not putting you in the top 10. Again, you'd be pretty far down the list, even with all the injuries. I would say that's a good place to start here with this college pitching crop. Has been going under the knife more than I think any other recent college pitching crop on memory. We're going to talk about some hurt pitchers, some currently hurt pitchers, some formerly hurt pitchers. They're all going to be on here. At number 10 is Florida State left-hander Parker Messick. What I love about this guy is that he pitches with a whole lot of fire, and when he blows a fastball by a hitter, he is going to let you know when he comes off the mound. One of the more animated pitchers we had in college baseball this year.
The upside here is maybe not as high as it is with some of the other arms we're going to talk about, but there is still real value in taking a guy who projects to be, maybe a back-end starter or a long reliever in the bullpen. That doesn't sound sexy, but it's still worthwhile.
Yeah, and Messick actually came to school as more of a two-way guy, so don't be misled by the body. He is actually a pretty good athlete, both on the mound and even in other parts of his game. It just doesn't look quite as pretty, but he seems a pretty safe big leaguer. It just might not be the top level impact of some of these other guys we're going to talk about.
At number 9 is Oklahoma State hurler Justin Campbell. Had a couple rough starts towards the end of the season for the Cowboys, but he sits at number 9 on our rankings because he's a pretty safe bet, just like Messick.
Yeah, again, this is a much bigger body, 6'7" right-hander. The fastball is very good. He's got a quality off-speed. The thing to watch with Campbell, you mentioned he struggled down the stretch. This dude was worked crazy hard. You look at his pitch counts every week. He had one of the highest inning counts in college baseball this year. And, this guy was he tried to carry this team as far as he could. And ultimately, we know what happened in Stillwater in that regional. I still like Justin Campbell. Again, he hasn't had as many, you tune in on a Friday night and he totally dominates. But the stuff there is really good. It's a great body. And I think there are teams that believe in their pitching development could really, really, really benefit from drafting a guy like Justin Campbell, maybe in the top of the second round or even maybe late first round.
At number 8 is Blade Tidwell. Maybe you've seen Blade Runner. This is Blade pitcher. He was a starter for the University of Tennessee, missed a good chunk of the season, first half of the season with an arm injury, came back down the stretch for the Volunteers and was fine. He was fine.
Yeah, this is a weird one. He kind of burst onto the scene at the end of his high school career. Maybe thought he could have gotten picked then, but goes to Tennessee, and obviously this year was part of, as we've talked about, one of the greatest college baseball teams we've ever seen. But because Tennessee had all these other pitchers like Drew Beam and Chase Burns and Chase Dolander, they weren't really sure how they were going to, fit him into the rotation. And yet Vitello was like, no, we are going to start Tidwell because he is so talented. The shoulder injury was a little bit concerning. This is the kind of guy where it's like the stuff is not getting as many swings and misses as you would expect based on the velocity and the movement. Here's the thing about Blade Tidwell. First of all, great name. Second of all, I thought his name was Blake until the middle of his freshman year. So, and this is me. Look, I feel like I'm reading draft stuff. I truly, there was one game where I was like, oh, it's Blade. That's way cooler. At number 7 is a guy who was very high on this list for us last year, even before we were making YouTube videos. And now he's back. Now he's not still in college, but he is still college age. Let's talk about KUMAR Rocker.
Obviously dominant in the 2021 season at Vanderbilt, drafted by the Mets, 10th overall. And the Mets were like, nah, we're good. They saw the medical. They didn't like it. They shouldn't have picked him in the first place. This has been rehashed and discussed many times. If you want to know more, just Google it. We're not going to explain it today. But what you do need to know is that Rocker essentially worked out and got healthy over the last year, made a handful of starts in independent ball, looked pretty good. The heater was 95, 96. Slider still outstanding from him. Now the concern, beyond any of the injury stuff, is that the fastball, just like Tidwell, does not get as many swings and misses as you would expect for something that's sitting in the mid-90s.
Yeah, and still when you have a slider like that and the velo is still there, teams still believe that Rocker is, first, second round talent. But when we came into last season, even once we got to the draft, everyone was assuming to hear his name called in the top 2, the top 3, the top 4. When he falls to 10, everyone's kind of questioning their entire world.
Existence.
Yeah, it was a crazy turn of events, but the health still is the biggest thing here, man. I mean, there were reports that he had some minor shoulder surgery after the whole debacle with the Mets last year, and he looked pretty good in his starts this year, but let's be honest, the competition he was facing in the old Frontier League was not exactly top-notch. The point is, we are rooting for this guy because he is great for baseball when he is on the mound, just as a personality, as a presence. There is still so many question marks that go into his profile, but I would still expect to hear his name called at some point on day one. Will it be in the top 10 again? I would be stunned. Back in the first round, maybe still possible. The ranges of outcomes with Kumar Rocker are wide.
The chances of him being a frontline starter in the big leagues are very low. The chances of him making the big leagues are very high. The chances of him being fun to watch are 100%. And for me, that's all I really give a shit about because I don't work for a team.
Yes, and we still believe in the talent enough to put him on here in our top 10. At number 6 is Gonzaga right-hander Gabriel Hughes. This is a guy who really burst onto the scene last summer with Team USA. Another very athletic, big-bodied right-hander who also hit a little bit for Gonzaga before this season. This is kind of the total package. It looks right. He's got 3+ pitches when he's on. But again, even not facing the best competition in the second half of the year, he wasn't quite as dominant as you would like to see. His stats weren't as overwhelming as we had from some of the other guys on this list. And, still, I'm a big believer in Hughes. I think he's a guy that you could maybe see go in that middle of the first round because, hey, guess what? He's been healthy. And that's something that you cannot say about almost any of these other pitchers in terms of a consistent track record. I think that could go a long way, as well as the overall package and projection. People rave about the makeup as well. I think this guy's a really safe bet to be a big league starter in some capacity, but we'll see how excited teams are about him on draft day.
Jordan, he got crushed by Colombia in the regional. Not Colombia, Colombia.
Yeah, Jorge Alfaro wasn't on that team. But still, look, hey, maybe give some respect to the Lions, all right? Ivy League, they swung it pretty good this year.
At number 5 is East Carolina pitcher Carson Whisenhunt. Now, the pause there is because Whisenhunt has a very bizarre journey. He was one of the best pitchers in college baseball in 2021, came into the season in 2022 as kind of like the no-doubt guy. He was healthy when nobody else was. He looked like he was going to be the top college arm taken, and then he just wasn't there the first weekend of the year. Turns out he tested positive for something called PEDs, was suspended for the entire season by the East Carolina Pirates, came back in, pitched in the Cape Cod League for a couple starts ahead of the draft. Jordan, where do things stand with Carson Whisenhunt?
Yeah, I mean, again, not ideal to miss your entire junior spring going into the draft, but he did get some outings on the Cape, although he did look a little bit rusty. Now, the thing with Whisenhunt is his stuff obviously ticked up a lot last year, which maybe raised some questions once we found out he had the PED test. At the same time, he still was showing quality, mid-90s fastballs. And the thing about Whisenhunt, it's an excellent changeup, one of the best changeups in the draft. So a changeup lefty with, plus velo is obviously very impressive. And what he showed in 2021 in front of a ton of scouts, a lot of scouts were watching that ECU team. This is a guy pretty similar to Jordan Wicks, except arguably I think with even more velocity. It's just shorter track record. So could he still go in the first round? I think he could, but it's certainly not as sure of a thing as it was at the beginning of the season.
At number 4 is Oregon State Beaver, Cooper HJERPE. Now, before we go any further, it's HJERPE. Just pretend like there's no H, okay? It's not HJERPE. It's not herpy.
Because he is probably going to have his fair share of interesting nicknames over the course of his career. This dude is as funky as it gets. But the thing is when you look at the numbers, and he's a Golden Spikes finalist, it was working. He was facing pretty damn good competition. He was doing it in the postseason as well, and while it does not look as conventional or as smooth, it is weird as hell, and he gets outs. And that is the kind of thing that, again, he's been healthy, he's done it for now multiple seasons, and that's why I think he's basically a lock to go in the first round, and maybe still the best bet to be the first college pitcher taken. I think if I had to bet right now who was the first college pitcher, I think I would bet on him. It is weird. It is really weird.
It's like bizarro Josh Hader, but like lower arm slot and somehow more extension, but the stuff is obviously not as good. It's easy to see a lanky lefty and be like, Chris Sale, but it's the stuff is not that level, but there's more funk and less fuzz.
But I mean, it's not like he's throwing 85. Like, he's more 90, 92, 93. But boy, does it play up. And anytime you talk to someone about JERPE, they're like, yeah, well, his pitch data is like out of control because it's just coming from such a weird angle and it has such weird movement and all this stuff. So clearly it's effective. And that's why I think there will be teams that will be happy to take this guy. Also seems like a pretty safe bet to pitch well in the big leagues. Roll TBD. But man, I think this guy is going to be really good. It just does not look like a first rounder when you watch it.
At number 3 is Campbell Camels hurler Thomas Harrington. He's got a name that sounds like he's a member of British Parliament, but he is a pitcher. He's not an MP.
He is a PO. He's a PO, right? Yeah. We're pretty sure that Mr. Harrington will not be hitting in pro ball. This is a guy where teams are excited about him because the delivery is silky smooth. The arm is relatively fresh. He doesn't have a bajillion innings on him. He was not super famous in high school. I mean, this guy was a walk-on for the Camels, and now here he is as one of the best pitchers in college baseball. Obviously, scouts saw a lot of this team because, one, they were very good, one of the better mid-major programs. Also there to see Zach Neto, who was, of course, very high on our college hitters list. And it's just a really smooth operation, and this is the kind of also athlete and general stuff and body and build and fresh arm that so many teams will be excited to bet on. Now, still shorter track record than some of these other names, and that's why I'm not sure he's going to go in the top half of the first round. But I love Thomas Harrington, and I would be thrilled for any team to get him in the back half of the first.
At number 2 is Alabama pitcher Connor Prielipp. Roll Tide, but not really. Prielipp looked like he could have been the number 1 pitcher taken overall in this class. He was awesome his freshman year, really good to start the season last year, and then kablooey went the elbow, as is the case with many pitchers in this world. He finally finished his rehab, I would say, about a month or so ago, and is back throwing 100% at the worst possible time for Alabama, but probably a good time for him.
Yeah, he did manage to show off his stuff in a few bullpens. Leading up to the draft, he threw at the combine in front of a bajillion scouts, which certainly helped. So the timing did sort of work out right there. Some other pitchers, like Peyton Pallette, who we did not mention with Arkansas, who I don't believe have thrown at all or are going to get to throw. Guys like Reggie Crawford. Like the timing of Tommy John had a big impact on when some of these guys were being seen. So to get Prielipp back on the mound, again, a big, talented left-hander coming out of the Wisconsin high school ranks, where he was, the top high school player at the time, and again, when you are dealing with this many injuries and the injuries are becoming more normalized and Tommy John is becoming more normalized, to see him come back and to look pretty close to his old self might be more than enough to say, yeah, no, this guy was already at the very top of our college pitcher board, and so we're going to take him in the first round and feel good about it. And that's why we have him all the way up at number 2, because there are very few left-handers with his combination of size, stuff, polish. But that doesn't mean there isn't risk here, because obviously he has very, very, very few college innings to his name, and that could scare off some teams as well.
He's barely thrown pitches to batters.
Right. I mean, the bullpens are cool, and you're getting the TrackMan stuff is looking great. You do have to face batters. The batters have to swing and miss at that plus stuff that you're showing in bullpens. So.
And at number 1 is Oklahoma Sooner CADE Horton. He heard a who. The story with Horton is really bonkers. He was a top 2-way and 2-sport guy coming out of Norman, Oklahoma. Got to campus with the Sooners and looked incredible. He's going to be their number 2 starter and starting third baseman as a freshman. And then, boom goes the elbow. Gets Tommy John surgery. Makes it back into the rotation by April. Has a handful of bad starts. Looks like he's probably just going to come back the next year. And then, kablam, learns a slider. And then in the playoffs for Oklahoma, he's unbelievably dominant. In the regional, the super regional, College World Series, all the scouts are there, all the eyeballs. I'm behind home plate. Jordan's watching on television. And Horton absolutely dominated Notre Dame, striking out a bucket of hitters, just lighting things up on the biggest stage. Makes another start in an elimination game in the finals against Ole Miss. Oklahoma ends up losing, but Horton strikes out, I think, 85 hitters in that game. And when you compare him to the other arms on this list, it's like the stuff is better. Okay. He did it on the biggest stage in college baseball. Okay. What else do you want, right? There's athleticism. Okay. It's basically there's no track record. And so you're just gambling on that what we saw for the last 5 weeks of the season is what he is.
It is one of the crazier draft rises that I can remember seeing. Now, it's not like talent wasn't there, right? I mean, it was there all along. People have always known who Cade Horton is. But to go from an 8 ERA at the end of April to the top college pitcher is crazy. Now, that said, as we mentioned, very short track, in some ways a long track record because people have known Cade Horton since he was, 16, 17. But on the other hand, it's like, dude, you have 5 good college starts. Now, they were at the highest possible in front of the most people and the biggest stage and the biggest pressure. And so that looks against the best teams. So that's pretty impressive. At the same time, I mean, we're dealing with a pretty small track record here. I mean, the thing with Horton is if he goes back to school, he's a draft eligible sophomore at age 20. If he goes back to school and does this next year, he's going in the top 5. He might go number 1 overall, right? He's not going number 1 overall this year. So if he really believes that he can go back to school and be a top 5 pick, he might say, hey, my price tag's $4 million. If you're not paying me now, I'm going. But I think someone's going to pay him. I don't know where in the draft it's going to be. I think it's going to happen, though, and I'm fascinated to see.
Those are our top 10 pitchers for the 2022 draft. Did you make the list? Let us know down in the comments if you're on our list. Like and subscribe. We got one more video coming out. Our funky, weird circus freaks in the back end of the draft that we're super interested in. Cannot wait for draft day coming up on Sunday in Los Angeles. We'll be there. That's it. Bye.
Can't wait.